We're not ready for what's coming next. The narratives we're being told are only half the story. But in today's video, we're going to expose the whole truth. The information we're about to share is extremely alarming, but it isn't fair with our viewers to keep sugarcoating reality as the mainstream media always does. We all need to know what's really going on and the things no one dares to announce to the public. We must get ready while we still can. It is true that the United States is suffering from stockouts of many items in thousands of grocery stores and supermarkets across the nation. It is also true that food supplies are getting tighter and tighter in every corner of the globe. Government authorities have been insisting that food shortages and our ongoing supply chain crisis are merely a result of the latest wave of infections and its ramifications on the labor market. But there's more to it, much more. Something they haven't been telling us is that inflation is climbing so rapidly that millions of farmers and food producers simply won't be able to plant their crops this year. In a recent article published by Michael Snyder, The Economist unveiled an email he received from a farming insider who allowed him to publicly share some of the content in it to the public, as long as his name was not revealed. Snyder highlighted that he has been corresponding with the insider for many years, but the information he shared this time around was simply shocking. The Economist has been repeatedly warning about tightening food supplies over the past few years, and he argues that what we have experienced so far is just the beginning, but he didn't realize how dire things have already become until he got that email. According to this farming insider, skyrocketing costs for fertilizer will make it impossible for millions of farmers and food producers to afford to plant corn this year. The following is an excerpt of the email. Things for 2022 are interesting and scary. Input costs for things like fertilizer, liquid nitrogen, and seeds are like triple and quadruple the old prices. It will not be profitable to plant this year. Let me repeat, the economics will not work. Our plan is to drop about 700 acres of corn off and convert it to soybeans. They use less fertilizer. We also have chicken manure from that operation. Guess what? We are not the only ones with those plans. Already, there is a shortage of soybean seeds, so we'll see how that will work out. The way I see it, there will be a major grain shortage later in this year, especially with corn. I mean, we are small with that. What about these people in the Midwest who have like 10,000 acres of corn? This will not be good. After having received that message, Snyder wrote him back with some questions. In response, the insider described a very bleak outlook for grain production in 2022. As for the farming, I see it getting bad, he said. Things like fertilizer and liquid nitrogen have tripled and quadrupled in price. Yes, commodity prices are up, but that certainly won't cover the new increased input costs. We are in North Carolina, so while certainly not like the Midwest, we still grow grain. The Midwest, of course, will have these same higher input costs as well, he continued. Corn, for example, typically takes about 600 pounds of fertilizer per acre, plus 50 gallons of liquid nitrogen. Times that by many acres, and that's a lot of money. Soybeans take much less. The plan for us and most others around here is to drastically cut corn acres and switch to soybeans. The problem is that there's apparently a soybean seed shortage because others have this plan as well. We were lucky enough to pre-buy enough to do it. However, most people probably don't have the money to front like that, the insider added. The way I see it, a corn shortage will come, he warned. I guess there could possibly be a glut of soybeans, but remember, that could depend on the seed being available. Of course, the corn market is much larger. Think animal feed and ethanol. What happens to the animal producers who depend on reasonably priced corn? I just don't see how it can end well, the farming veteran stressed. Even if we end up with plenty of soybeans, even a glut, then you'll have a busted market for that, he explained. I don't know. There just isn't much history to base any of this on. I just see it hurting both grain farmers and animal farmers, and also translating into more shortages and price increases for consumers who buy the end products, the insider concluded. For his part, the economist said he was completely stunned when he read those messages, considering that corn is one of the foundational pillars of America's food supply. Such a steep decline in production would mean that millions of food items that include corn in their ingredients will not be available in the stores anymore. If you go buy some groceries and start reading through the components of various products, you'll rapidly realize that corn is in nearly everything we consume in one form or another. So, if a shortage of corn hits this country, our current food supply problems will go from bad to worse. And we might not even be able to source corn from other countries because most of them are experiencing the same issues too. With fertilizer prices going through the roof all around the world, major food manufacturing regions such as South America are seeing these increased costs severely hamper corn production. On top of that, the coffee we consume here in the United States, which is produced in Brazil, is also in very short supply, as Brazilian farmers are hard hit by higher fertilizer prices and produce fewer coffee beans to export. According to Cristina Ribeiro Duval, who comes from a long line of coffee growers, costs for fertilizers have tripled compared to the same time last year. To make things worse, a new drought led to mass crop failures this month, which means that Ms. Duval, 75, will have to produce only a fraction of a Ribeiro Duval brand of coffee, which is largely exported to the US and some European countries. Fertilizer is not only more expensive, but also it's harder to find. This year you pay, then put your name on a waiting list, and the supplier delivers it when he has it, she says. That's to say, soon drinking that morning coffee will become a privilege for those who can afford it. Meanwhile, in Africa, fertilizer costs could result in an acute drop in demand, given that more and more farmers cannot keep up with rising prices, and in turn, that will crater food production in many countries. Data released by the International Fertilizer Development Center, that's a global non-profit organization, pointed out that fertilizer demand in Africa could drop by 30% in 2022. Now, that would translate to 30 million metric tons less food produced, which the agency says is equivalent to the food needs of 100 million people. This is beyond serious. What is the world gonna look like without enough food for 100 million people? It is safe to say that many more hunger crises will emerge this year. That is absolutely devastating, and it feels like global leaders are not taking our problems seriously. They'll let things get unsustainable before they start acting. In the US, farmers are having to come up with new strategies for their crops this year. Lower fertilizer use will inevitably weigh on food production and quality, affecting food availability, rural incomes, and the livelihoods of the poor, explained Josef Schmidhuber, Deputy Director of the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization's Trade and Markets Division. As the health crisis enters year 3, millions of American households are having to down on the quality and quantity of food they consume, the World Bank said in a recent note, outlining that high fertilizer prices were adding to costs. Globally, roughly 2.4 billion people lacked access to adequate food last year, up 320 million from the year before, the organization said. Inflation spiked in about 80% of global economies last year, almost a third seeing double-digit food inflation. Unfortunately, it is now clear that the stage is being set for a historic global food crisis. Most Americans still think this sort of problem will never hit us, though they believe in the strength of a long-gone America that used to be immune from the issues the rest of the world was suffering from. But now that extensive shortages are plaguing every corner of the nation, even the mainstream media is alarmed. The Wall Street Journal just published an article entitled, "U.S. Food Supply is Under Pressure from Plants to Store Shelves." And D.C.'s Homeland Security has issued a notice urging consumers to just buy what you need and leave some for others. A desperate attempt to prevent grocery shortages from getting worse. In essence, what would have been unimaginable 3 or 4 years ago is now making headlines day after day, and the food supply chain collapse is just the most evident threat. But the truth is, we're now in the process of undergoing a system collapse. As Victor Davis Hanson has pointed out, in modern times, several nations have suffered a systemic collapse. The term describes the sudden inability of once prosperous populations to continue with what had ensured the good life as they knew it. Abruptly, the population cannot buy or even find once plentiful necessities. They feel their streets are unsafe, laws go unenforced or are enforced inequitably. Every day things stop working. The government turns from reliable to capricious, if not hostile. The surging prices of daily necessities, including food, housing, healthcare, transportation, and fuel, are strangling the middle class. Who could have believed a year ago that America would now beg Saudi Arabia and beg Russia to pump more oil, as we pulled our own oil leases and cancelled pipelines and oil fields? Hanson asks. Sadly, we have to start considering that supply shortages and empty shelves are the new normal. But realistically speaking, many people will still be caught off guard by the pace of this change. The world is quickly turning upside down, and global events have been accelerating at record speed. It has been hard to keep up with all of these changes, so we should all start paying very close attention. Now that you know all of this information that you've heard in this video, please do not go back to sleep. This is not a drill. We're heading to a horrifying future, and we should all start acting accordingly. Thank you very much for watching. If you found this content informative, we strongly recommend you buy 7 Year Apocalypse. That's the latest book from the economist and financial expert, Mr. Michael Snyder. In the meantime, please leave this video a thumbs up, share this message with friends and family, do it now, and subscribe to our channel to always keep updated with our latest notifications. We look forward to welcoming you to our next update.